Efficiency Unlocked is hosted by two tech-savvy physicians and dear friends of mine, Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold, who are experts in using technology to automate routine tasks and increase efficiency in everyday and business life. Let's see what they have for us today.
Stay tuned for this series of episodes where we'll be discussing the game-changing impact of AI in the realm of patient care and physician well-being.
Get ready to unlock efficiency with NerdMDs.
Efficiency Unlocked.
And as Machiavelli would have told you as he wrote his book in the 13th century, like, change in an organization is so difficult because at best, your advocates are lukewarm and your detractors have all the passion in the world. And it played out in that meeting. Our family medicine colleagues say, well, that's really interesting. You should come to our group and talk some more about this. We might be interested. And the naysayer stands up from an unknown, I will not name their department, CT. The medical record is a dangerous place. Patients have no business being in there. That's
Dr. C.T. Lin, our guest on this show this week, talking about why storytelling is so important.
In hindsight, if I were to go back to that day, I would say, we have 160,000 medical errors where patients die every day. And who better than the patient to spot an error in their record so that, if we miss the penicillin allergy, the patient's going to tell us about it. And don't you want to provide better care? And this is our opportunity to be on the bleeding edge of something really great.
And there he's explaining how he should have told the story.
And as a result of re-engineering the process by taking the team apart and putting it back together in a unique way, our most recent stat is our mortality statistic has dropped so much that it's the equivalent of saving 800 more lives per year.
And that's CT talking about a real-life application of artificial intelligence saving lives at UCHealth in Colorado, where he serves as the CMIO. We're going to talk about that and a lot more, and if you stay to the end, you might even get a special new edition song directly from CT and his ukulele. Hello, listeners. Welcome to this week's episode of Efficiency Unlocked, our NerdMDs podcast. I'm your host, Adam Carew, and with me, as always, or sometimes he doesn't make it, is co-host Dr. Dale Gold. Hey, Dale, how are you today?
Hey, Adam. How's it going?
It's cool. It's happy to see you in person. We don't always see each other in person. So we just got back from a little trip ski back to Epic Land. And I call it the land of Disney because their campus looks like a combo of Disneyland and Google in Silicon Valley. So if people haven't been there, it's an amazing place to visit. So how are things going with you, Dale?
It's going good. Like you said, kind of the post-UGM hangover, kind of getting back into the regular CMIO life right now.
Yeah, that's very true. So, we have a cool guest on today that you just heard an intro about. But before we get started, Dale, I want to ask you, did you play an instrument when you were a kid?
Well, I wouldn't say play an instrument, but I did take some guitar lessons a long, long, long time ago and never really got very good at it. But I would say guitar. But I haven't really looked back. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I played the requisite instrument as part of a mandatory music class in elementary school. I've always enjoyed music. I've not been musically inclined. I did have an electric kind of drum pad set back in, maybe it was the 80s, late 80s. Definitely love those things. My mom didn't until she got me a pair of large headphones. And then it was infinitely better for the household. But sorry. I just remember my mom really not liking that at all. All right. Sounds like, Dale, you and I should not start a band. I think we should probably stick to what we're good at, which I guess evidently is maybe hosting a podcast. But how about we introduce the guest today?
That sounds great. Let's get to our guest. Yep.
All right. So we have a very special guest today here that we've known for a while. He's a local friend and a Denver neighbor, and arguably the best ukulele playing CMIO in the world. I don't know if you have that title, CT, but please welcome Dr. CT Lin to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We are super pumped to have
you. So happy to have you.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. CT, I mean, can you just share initially with us like how you got into informatics, and maybe even kind of explain what informatics is? Because I think we sometimes do in this show, but like, how did you jump into that journey yourself?
Wow. I think I would self-describe as old now. I started in University of Colorado in 1995. Moved here as a sensitive man of the 90s. My wife is a pulmonary critical care doc. She accepted a fellowship in pulmonary here in 95, and I had to uproot myself from where I was at UC Davis to come here. I expressed interest in computers, and so the department chair here put me on a computer committee, and we were just sort of bubbling along for a while until in 1997 I was chief complainer. The hospital had been quite proud of the fact that they were paying for telephone dictation, and they had said, "Well, you guys need to stop complaining because we bought you this lab system called Statlan. It's a DOS-based system. It records 3 whole months of test results. Because, like, what more do you need than 3 months of test results, really? The way you access this is reverse chronological. Oh, and by the way, we're so proud of its usability because here's how we know it's so usable. The login is lab, and the password is lab. I mean, how much more usable do you want it to be? So fast, so efficient. And then on the keyboard, the way that you would navigate the chart after you found your patient using the medical record number is F1 key was page down, and escape, which is a ½ inch away, is quit. So here I am finding the patient. I'm looking for a test result from a month ago. I know it's about 20 pages down, F1, F1, F1. Hey, what just happened? I got logged out. I got to start over again. I have like so many usability problems. I wrote them 7 pages of complaints about Statlan, about the dictation service that requires 30 key punches to get the right chart into the right, and it's so easy to fat finger it, and so on and so on. And eventually, the CIO calls me up a couple of weeks later and says, "You seem to have a lot of opinions about computers, and maybe we could put you on a couple of more committees, and we'll be very generous and pay for 0.1 FTE." Because really, more than a couple of hours of committee meetings a month, we don't really need you. So that's how I started. And my colleague actually told me a story. I'm like, well, should I accept this tiny appointment? Because it doesn't seem like it's even worth my time to do that. And in fact, in modern days, when we appoint an informaticist, we say that 0.2 at the very minimum is what we think people need to be efficient and effective. We can talk about that at a later time. But when I went to my mentor at the time, I said, should I even accept it? That's kind of, putting myself in the hole to start. And he says, no, this is your nose of the camel. Excuse me, nose of the camel? He says, did you not read your Scheherazade in college? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He says, Scheherazade, 1001 Arabian Nights, the nose of the camel, the story of in the desert, the Bedouins, there's a young boy who receives as a gift his first camel, and the camel's sleeping outside. The humans are sleeping inside, and he says, "Dad, the sandstorm is so bad outside. Can my camel sleep in the tent without?" "No, absolutely not. Camels sleep outside." "Oh, all right, Dad." Dad goes on a big journey the next day, and Mom, can my camel sleep in the tent with? No, you heard your dad. The camels sleep outside, but the sand on his nose, he can't even breathe out there. The sandstorm's so bad. Maybe just his nose. Can his nose stick in the tent? Fine. Just the nose. So first night's thing. His eyes are being bothered by the sand. Can at least his head be in the tent? So the head, the neck, the forelegs. Pretty soon the camel's in the tent. Humans are sleeping outside. So this is your nose of the camel. Like, they give you 0.1 and demonstrate your usefulness, and over time, maybe you're rewarded. And that kind of was true. I went from 0.1 FTE. I'm currently I went up to 0.2, 0.3, 0.5. I'm up to 85% informatics. I still practice medicine. I think that's still actually pretty important for informaticists to, as one of my colleagues so indelicately put it, you have to eat your own dog food. But okay, that's not the metaphor I'm going for, but I get your point. That sounds good. And so that's sort of my origin.
I'll just jump in. So obviously a lot has changed since those early days of, enter password lab, and have those systems read F1 down. Informatics has changed a lot, and there's been stages since then. What are your predictions as someone who's seen so many changes in healthcare and technology? What do you see for informatics in the next 10 years? What are the challenges you think we might face, and the skills of a CMIO and an informaticist looking forward?
I love this question and I hate this question. I think that in the 90s and early 2000s, we would commonly sit in the executive boardroom and talk about 5 and 10-year plans. And we don't do that anymore. We talk about 1 to 3 year plans because things change so quickly, right? And, the introduction of the iPhone. Before that, we're like, well, how can we make the chiclet keyboards a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient? And suddenly it's a different game, a year later. And I think there are disruptive technologies, like, for example, generative AI, that are going to pop up and we're going to wait, all of our plans are gone. And I think it's inefficient to be thinking 5 to 10 years out, other than in principles, so that you learn how to stay current. I think that's the main thing. Rather than say, well, AI is going to do this, or generative is going to do that, and predictive is going to do this. I think we have to sit back and every year go, what's it look like now? Because the landscape's different. How do I keep up with that? Am I reading Wired.com, or better yet, MIT Technology Review, because their articles seem to be 6 to 12 months ahead of Wired in terms of the latest startup and the things that are being sniffed out in cyberspace? I don't know, right? So the current thing is, it's fascinating that generative AI is getting to a point where it's like a smart medical student, and maybe in a few years it's a smart third-year resident, or maybe it's a fellow at that point, or maybe it's smarter than you. And then who are we anymore if the thing is more up to date on the literature, has better judgment, and is more empathetic? What do we got left? I can hold your hand. I have warm blood in my hands. I mean, I don't know. So it's stay nimble. I think there's great opportunities for human AI partnerships, but the next thing is going to be a curveball, and they're going to come faster and faster. I feel like we're on the beginning of the hockey stick of the uptick, and we have to get used to going faster. I had a conversation about 10 years ago with our chief financial officer, who had said to me, so with this electronic health record, can you just tell me what % done you are? Are you 70% done? Can we be done investing in EHRs in a couple more years? I have no sense of that. I'm like, oh, you have no idea what's coming. You have no idea what's coming. So I think that's true for us. We have no idea what's coming. We can only look out a few years and say, all right, I think AI for response to patients, AI for generating notes, that's interesting right now. We weren't talking about this 6 months ago. Don't know. Not a futurist. And I think most futurists don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think that adaptability is sort of the key to that answer. I think being able to take the changes that come and being able to understand them and how to, relate them to clinical and figure out how we apply them, that's probably an innate skill that is going to be valuable in the next 10 years.
Now, I will say one idea I love is the idea of a Greek chorus. I don't know if you've heard me talk about this, but I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great if I have a smart student whose job it is to comb the literature and give suggestions, or over time be able to comb through the patient's chart and remind me of things that maybe I wrote about but sort of forgot and didn't put into the overview and the problem list. And maybe I have not just one assistant, but a chorus of assistants, one who is more optimistic. The patient's going to be fine. Why don't you just give them some reassurance and see him back in a few weeks? And the other one's like, I have a bad feeling about this. You probably should do a bunch more testing. And how about a CT scan, MRI, PET scan? And then you can sort of pick and choose from your optimist version of yourself and the pessimist version of yourself and go, you know what? Reassurance sounds good, but maybe the CT of the lumbar is a good idea, right? And sort of give supporting evidence for each one, and you have different versions that you can pick from. I really like that as a human who takes the final judgment and not be counting on necessarily even just one assistant. So
no, I love that. And I think, what you described initially and what Dale just reinforced, I think it's like this nimbleness that we have to exhibit. I mean, I think that's just evident in life now, right? I mean, I think in healthcare, it's like healthcare is going to dramatically change in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years. But you're right. You can't look that far out because who knows what it's going to be, because I think we were all completely blown away, what's happened in just the last couple of years, how it's unfolded. Super, super interesting. Well, CT, let's pivot to, coming up shortly here is a resurgence of something I believe that you guys had put together for several years before the pandemic hit, which was having kind of a mini, we'll call it a mini, but like a gathering in the Denver area, kind of like a user group meeting of the different health systems, and bringing together the informaticists, the other thought leaders, the other leaders in these organizations to kind of share. And I'll just say, what I love about this is, obviously healthcare is competitive, right? I mean, we won't lie. There's competitors all around us, and everyone's jockeying for a patient and the business. But what I think is really cool about this rescue event is that it is bringing people together, like the way Epic does, and it brings the customers together that are really trying to deliver healthcare to, honestly, our friends and family and colleagues, in our area. So can you tell us a bit more about this rescue conference and, where you came up with the idea a while ago and what that kind of success looks like?
Sure. I don't actually have in front of me the acronym that it stands for, but I'm known for making terrible committee names. For example, my physician informatics group is the large pig. And now some of my members object to being called pigs, and I'm sorry, but I'm the CMIO. I get to call you what I want. And then I have my senior medical directors who are part of my small pig, sort of kitchen cabinet, which prompted one of our newest members who just recently joined us to say, well, does that make me a piglet? I'm like, well, yes, it makes you a piglet. So anyway, there's that. And then rescue, I think we called it that because it's regional. Regional seminars in informatics. No, there's no informatics in there. A collaborative user group for Epic users, I think, something like that. And so it's October 30th. And we've done this for a couple of years prior to the pandemic, just because of the idea that there are, as Google has always said in their books and reports, that there are more smart people who don't work for you than who do work for you. And why not share, right? That it makes us all better if we take and borrow ideas from each other and try to make healthcare better. There's so much opportunity for improvement. It's not like, oh, there's only one way to improve now, and oh, Dale got it, and I'm very jealous. No, we improve our electronic health record systems to make care better, and this is what the intent is. We'll have a guest speaker from San Diego, and we have Epic members coming to tell us about cool stuff ahead. There's always more local analysts and informaticists who wish they could go to UGM than can. And why not, bring some of that content back and share it among ourselves. It's a lot of fun to meet people and shake hands with folks who are doing similar work.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's so much that we all have to do. There's no way that any one of us can do it all. So if we can kind of share when it comes to the informatics piece and understanding how to use technology to better take care of our patients and share some of those successes, I think we all win. And I think that collaboration is huge. So, really excited to help you promote that and hopefully get some people from our organizations to join and listeners to join. Really exciting. Kind of pivoting to another concept, something that I guess I know about you because I've seen you present many a time. But in my research, I didn't realize how deep you were into the storytelling workshops and studying storytelling. Can you tell me a little bit about how the storytelling has fit into your informatics career and maybe some storytelling you've done when it comes to this AI and healthcare piece that we're in, and how you've helped your organization think through that?
My journey to recognizing that storytelling is important is a very long one. I actually give a talk called my 16-year journey to open notes. And I'll just say in brief about generative AI, because that's the sexy, shiny new object lately, is that that doesn't take a lot of selling. That's not a lot of storytelling needed for someone to go, oh my gosh, you're going to have something record my conversation with the patient and then write the note for me? Sign me up. There's no storytelling needed to go, no, seriously, you really want this tool? No, right? That's very different. Same thing with like incoming messages from patients. You're going to draft a reply so I don't have to draft it a certain percentage. Fine, sign me up. Storytelling is more important when you're like, really? Why would I want to do that? Well, why would I want to use an electronic health record? Why would I want to share test results with patients? It's a terrible idea. Right? And when we first did Open Notes, we called it Sparrow. Really terrible name. My colleague Steve Ross and I did this work back in 2001, 10 years before Open Notes. We studied 100 patients in cardiology and gave them everything from our 3M clinical workstation. Where's the 3M EHR now? I wonder. But we showed them progress notes because they were dictated. We showed them test results. We showed them echocardiogram results. And we went to the cardiology department and said, well, we'd like to sign your clinic up for this randomized controlled trial. Of the 7 cardiologists, 3 of them said, well, that's interesting. We should probably try for more transparency. 4 of them said, it's a terrible idea. And the only reason I'm going to participate in your study is because you look like you're doing a rigorous academic measurement. And at the end of the year, you're going to know exactly how bad an idea this is. And we're like, wow, thank you. And we'll take it and we'll run with it. And so we published that in 2001. And I came back with like statistically significant p-values for the randomized versus the controls. First, for the experimental being better understanding of their doctor, more trust in their physician and their team, increased adherence to therapy. And these are all statistically significant. And it was like pulling teeth to try to get people to change their minds, because at the time I was not clear what game I was playing. I was playing the scientific publication game where you're scrutinized and raked over the coals for the quality of your p-values. And I'm ready to defend my p-values to the end. But I didn't realize I'm in the leadership and change management game. Someone didn't teach me about that for 10 years, right? Until someone goes, you should read Leading Change. I'm like, what is that? What are you talking about? And that's where storytelling comes in, because I went to the larger group. We published the study in 2001. I went to my leadership group in 2003, and I said, transparency in healthcare is reasonable. We studied it here. We have good p-values showing improved patient adherence therapy. Nurses love it. Doctors do not have increased work effort. Let's turn this on for everyone. Look at the numbers. And as Machiavelli would have told you, as he wrote his book in the 13th century, like, change in an organization is so difficult because at best, your advocates are lukewarm and your detractors have all the passion in the world. And it played out in that meeting. Our family medicine colleagues say, well, that's really interesting. You should come to our group and talk some more about this. We might be interested. And the naysayer stands up from an unknown, I will not name their department, CT. The medical record is a dangerous place. Patients have no business being in there. I happen to know in my practice that patients value my follow up with them when they come to my appointment, where I explain to them everything that's happening. And then, I'm with Joe. Yeah, Joe and Frank have a good point. Yep, right. We don't want to change. We don't need to change. Why are we doing this first? There's no one else doing this. This is a crazy idea. Thank you for your science experiment. You can go now. And I'm like, what just happened? I had great p-values and, I didn't tell a story. In hindsight, if I were to go back to that day, I would say, we have 160,000 medical errors where patients die every day. And who better than the patient to spot an error in their record so that, if we miss the penicillin allergy, the patient's going to tell us about it. And don't you want to provide better care? And this is our opportunity to be on the bleeding edge of something really great. Don't you want an engaged patient who, instead of saying, oh, that last pill didn't work, just give me something else, to say, as actually happened during the study, a patient called in. And the nurses love this, because the nurses say the patients call with very different questions. Instead of saying, hey, I'm asking about the echocardiogram. What's my ejection fraction? What does that mean? They call and they say, I see my ejection fraction went from 17% to 33%. Is that the lisinopril working? Like, what? A completely different question, because they did their homework. They read about it. They read the doctor's note. They read the reasoning. They did that. And they come with much more sophisticated. Who doesn't want a more sophisticated, engaged patient, right? And so if I were to tell that story differently, this is what I would have said back then. But that's 16 years before I took it from a research project to finally being system-wide in 2016 with our organization. So that's the storytelling piece of, like, this is how you change minds. You don't give p-values and expect people to jump.
I love that, CT. I mean, and so many things you just said right in that snippet, which I'm definitely going to use as some sound bites to promo this show, is I think the there's so many of those similar like principles that are applying right now, to this AI wave, right? I mean, like and just some of the stuff too that even just Epic just announced. I'm thinking like you were talking about the concept of open notes, which is pretty much table stakes now. I don't think it's going to be, patient data, like patients are going to like really be able to own their own data, their health information in fairly short order. And they're going to be able to plug that in wherever they want. We're not quite there yet, but that's like coming. And, it's that notion of like,
I would love for patients to be able to, you read about these individuals in the New York Times and others where like the terminology is not, we've moved from the E-patient, right, the electronically savvy patient, to the D patient, the designer patient who takes their data and actually builds something from it and then shows you, hey, I built this thing. Like, do you want to like give this to other people? Like there's a person who, this was 7-8 years ago, they wrote about this in Wired, about a person who took their CGM, one of the rudimentary CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, and wrote some code to connect it to their insulin pump, and built the first closed loop system because Medtronic was taking years and years. And he's like, I'm going to hack this together in a weekend and troubleshoot it and build it for myself. And then I'm going to give the code away. And he did that like 10 years before Medtronic was out there selling a closed loop system. Right. So, and if we can give patients good enough data on their own, they can go and use it effectively. At this point, we give patients like PDFs and narratives. Why can't we give them like codified data so that they can actually recombine it with a startup if they want to, work with a startup and do something fascinating with it? Yeah, there's huge opportunity there.
I think you're spot on with that. Well, so along the lines of like AI and use cases of AI, I guess this is like a 2-part question for you. I guess, what are you kind of most excited about? Maybe either current state and then kind of expand it out around the clinical AI use cases. And then second kind of follow-up question to that is, what have you deployed at UCHealth? What have you guys been using over the years? I think people think AI just started with ChatGPT, but we know AI has been around since the 70s. And it's obviously evolved. But yeah, I'd love to hear, your thoughts on those two questions.
There's 2 large buckets of AI. There's predictive AI. We used to call it predictive analytics, but AI is such a sexy name. Like no, we're not doing predictive analytics. We're doing predictive AI. That's what we're doing. Yeah. So that's one piece. And we're actually quite proud of the fact that we've combined our virtual health center for remote monitoring with our sepsis prediction risk. And we've been able to demonstrate, and this is Amy Hassel's work, our chief nursing officer out of the virtual health center. The idea that when you put a predictive model or an AI in front of a bedside clinician who's already running for their lives, trying to keep up with everything going on, it doesn't move the needle at all, right? If you want to tell doctors, hey, this particular patient maybe in 12 hours might develop deterioration or sepsis, and you go and look at the first one, nope, that's not true. Go to the second, nope, that's not true. And look the 5 or 6 alerts, and you go, none of these are true, I think. And the mathematician says, no, if you check 30 patient alerts, you're going to catch every sepsis case. Like, who has time to do a 30-to-1 signal to noise ratio to figure out which patient you really want to worry about? And so when we did our first pass after 3 months, there was no change in time to antibiotics or rescue from sepsis or transfers to the ICU. And it turns out if you give it to someone who can dedicate time to it, which we're very lucky for us. We were just standing up at the virtual health center for the purposes of monitoring ICU beds in smaller hospitals where they couldn't pay for or afford an entire critical care doc for the one bed that they have, right? One critical care bed, and it's not worth paying a full-time person to sit there and 28 days out of 30 you have nobody in that bed. So we set up a virtual health center one ICU doc can monitor 5 or 6 hospitals worth of ICU beds. And by the way, they weren't busy. And at the same time, we're trying to figure out how to do the virtual prediction. This person saying, is there something else you'd like me to do? We're like, please, could you look at all these alerts and try to find the signal and the noise? And it was actually the nurses, critical care nurses, who were the sweet spot for being able to do that. And as a result of re-engineering the process by taking the team apart and putting it back together in a unique way, our most recent stat is our mortality statistic has dropped so much that it's the equivalent of saving 800 more lives per year from deterioration compared to baseline in our own organization because of the speed of response to deterioration sepsis. IV fluids are an hour earlier, antibiotics are 45 minutes earlier, detection is an hour earlier, and all of these things make huge differences in this sepsis disease that, what is a 50% mortality at our usual pace. But boy, you move that upstream by a couple of hours and you dramatically change the outcome. So that's just predictive work. The AI work, everyone is talking about the same three things from Epic. There's, Epic's working on 110, 150 AI projects, but the big three, I think, are ambient notes, which everyone's scrambling to partner with one of the big vendors. Epic is partnering with us for what's now being called ART, automated response technology. So the incoming message from patients, it's writing a draft for you, and the doc can go, I can use that, or I can edit it, or I can start fresh. And we have perhaps the most experience with generative AI in that space with ART. I'll tell you two examples, because there's great examples out of that and terrible examples out of it. I think our utilization rate is in the 15 to 20% rate of the drafts being used by the clinicians or nurses or MAs. There are some gotchas that you have to watch out for. Originally, we were sending all of our messages to the MA to be screened so that the doc doesn't get them originally. But the AI doesn't know who you're sending it to, so it drafts it as if you're the doctor. And it's sometimes giving medical advice, which you would have to vet. But we had two examples that became sort of event reporting for us, which was an MA read a note where a patient says, my heart rate's pretty low. Should I cut my metoprolol dose? And the AI says, it's very reasonable to cut your metoprolol dose. And our medical assistant, who's not intended to be diagnosing or treating, goes, send. Well, it looks pretty reasonable. Well, why wouldn't I send that? So, what's the right way for humans to interact with this tool? Do we need the AI to write something differently or to subcategorize it to say this is safe for an MA to work with? Or because the AI is able to sort of categorize the sentiment and figure out, which human. So we've actually redirected these messages largely in the practices that have nurses to go to the nurse, because the nurse is also, again, the sweet spot for saying, I can deploy all of the clinical advice to the patient with the AI assistance. And for those things that need to go to the doctor, I can shunt that way, or I can move things over to the MA. And the time to response now has gone dramatically down because the nurses can go, looks good, send this way, send that way, looks good. So we're learning some cool things. Perhaps the best example, sometimes this thing can be pretty astounding. We had a patient send the entirety of the incoming message was, swallow knuckles in the morning. What should I do? And you think there's no chance. Now, what we do is we give the AI the message and the last progress note from that doctor, right? And so the reply says, I'm sorry to hear that your knuckles are swelling in the morning. As we discussed at your appointment, this is likely related to your rheumatoid arthritis, and I asked you to increase your anti-inflammatories to 3 times per day. Now, how's that going? Because if it's not going well, I would like to see you again. And you're like, what? This is what I'm here for, right? This is exactly what it's designed for. And occasionally there's these glimpses of brilliance where you're like, that's phenomenal. So I think we're just on the beginning of that journey, and we can't wait to see what's coming next.
Yeah, that last piece you just mentioned, it reminds me of a quote that, when the first people got their hands on ChatGPT 4, even before it was released, their sentiment was, wow, this thing is the smartest thing I've ever used. And it's like also the dumbest thing I've ever used. And it's true. Like you get these like glimpses of absolute brilliance where you're just like, holy cow. And then you get something where you're like, that is not good. So, no, that's a funny story.
All right, let's jump in a little bit more to a conversation I think that you and I had a little bit of in the airport once, which I thought was really interesting. And, I know that you're very much pro ambient documentation, as we all are, because I think it can help relieve so much of the admin burden. But, I think that there's also some really important pieces of our role as, clinical informatics to at least think through, what are the unintended risks of delegating note writing to AI, especially, from your perspective. You brought up good points with medical education. What are those risks that you think about and that I think that we all need to think about just to monitor for those and to be careful? And maybe a 2-part question, what do you think the value of, writing your own note is, and what could we lose?
I in no way am advocating for more friction in the work with electronic health records, but I do think there is productive friction. And I have to say that there are a fair number of times when I have a puzzling case that I'm working with that I really don't know where it's going. And it's in the evening where I'm thinking about the patient again, where I go, oh, you know what? Scleroderma. Oh, you know what? I should have worked them up for XYZ. And it's that time when I'm not under time pressure where I go, my brain has had some sort of subconscious time to think and go, that's an idea that didn't come up during the visit because I'm flying through my day talking to patient after patient. Where does that thinking go? Because the AI is not thinking. The AI is matching the next best word and showing it to you and going, is that good enough? Do you like that? And that's what I worry about, right? So if I'm not thinking, where does the thinking go? And maybe there is no more thinking. I remember Ted Chiang wrote an article for The Atlantic, The New Yorker, about AI generative text is like a lossy JPEG image. And every time you JPEG compress the image over and over again, it gets to be much more generic and much less crisp. And is that what we're doing to ourselves? Because I'm going to eventually have the AI write my daily progress note in the hospital. And then when I go and ask it to do a discharge summary, it's going to summarize what it wrote for you. And then there'll be a summary of the summary. And then we're going to do a chart summary a year later and summarize the chart summary plus the chart summary plus the progress note. And, what happens to that data when you give it trust over what to include and exclude? And we're going to say, well, that's good enough. That's standard of care. Right? I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. Do I need, again, the Greek chorus to argue with each other over what's important to put in? I don't know. Maybe that's better than a human. But that's what I worry about. And I don't think there's a clear path. This is the creative hat we have to put on and go, is that good enough? And do we accept that? Or do we need to do something different and design something intentionally to not lose the crispness of the deep thinking that we do as clinicians?
Right, you're going to have the AI note writers arguing with the AI coders and going back and forth between each other. While
I think that's a zero-sum game. There are entire swaths of things that people are building that I think, you know what? You're just going to face the AI across the hall. And it's a zero-sum game. There's no more dollars in healthcare. You're not going to suddenly have a windfall of like, ooh, that's going to be magical, because you got to believe that the insurance companies and the feds, whomever else, are out there building their own filters, AI filters, going, yeah, this entire paragraph's AI written. Just toss it, right? So, there's no benefit to that. Where I think there's benefit is being a third party in the room, thinking of things that we haven't thought of. I think the sweet spot for generative AI, honestly, in this age, because of hallucinations, because of sometimes it's terrible, sometimes it's terrific, is having it work on text or content that you're already the expert and you want to make it faster for you. That's great. What I worry about is our patients out there going, I'm going to plug in a whole bunch of symptoms and have it diagnose me. You have no idea how accurate or not accurate it is. And we have that risk too of saying, hey, teach me about this new thing that I don't know anything about. I guess I'll just trust you. I think that's a terrible use of it at this point.
Yeah, that's, I think along these lines, I want to ask you about, your thoughts about medical education. Because I think Dale and I talk about this a lot, like how we think about when we went through medical school. We won't tell you when that was, CT, because you already told us when you started in Colorado. I do wonder. I think obviously medical education has to change. And I did last week, I learned that Yale is doing something pretty creative with generative AI and med students. I don't know if you heard about this, but they said that they're having medical students do a mock encounter, with an actor like we typically would do in medical education to learn how to take an interview and, talk with the patient. But they're having generative AI, one of those tools, listen and generate a note of it. But they're making the student also generate a note of that encounter and then actually learn from the AI what they missed and how it phrased things. And it's like a learning tool. So my question, one, I think that's pretty cool. It's a really cool use case, but yeah, what are your thoughts on like how medical education is going to change and have to adapt to this and maybe these other kind of creative examples of using these LLMs to actually train the next wave of doctors?
I have two stories about it. One is that I've been reading a lot about how college professors are having the worst time with generative AI in the beginning, right? You can't send take-home tests anymore because they'll come back with crisp AI-generated answers, essays that are perfect 5-paragraph, follow all these principles, and it comes back and you're like, it's perfect. So you can't do that anymore. And what they're doing now, which I think is really clever, is to say, your homework is to go ask the AI how to write this essay. And then I want to see version 1 that the AI wrote. And then I want to see your edits that you made it better because you followed the principles that are in our classroom we talked about. Like, how do you make this concept more crisp? How do you make a better insight than the AI did? Because as an editor, that's what your human brain is for. And so to assume that AI will be used and then to say, you need to be better than that. And how are you going to stay ahead? Creatively or combining different ideas that the AI didn't think of. Like, I really like that a lot. At the same time, when I get a second year, first year, third year med student, and they come like, oh, you're the CMIO, we're going to talk about Epic. I'm like, no, you're going to handwrite your first SOAP note or APSO note, and you're going to tell me that you understand what components go into a good note. And only after you graduate from that do we talk about having you start to use templates, because those are shortcuts for you to work faster, but you don't. If you rely on the template goes away. You're like, how do I write a note, right? When this was a decade ago, we had an organization, not ours, thankfully, go down, and there'd been a generation of residents who'd never written admission orders. And the team, and they would say, here's some blank pieces of paper, write some orders. And like, how do we remember the 15 things I'm supposed to write for admission, like ADC Van Dismal? Like, never heard of that. Or AD Cadaver, never heard of that. And so that's what I worry about, is that if you automatically leap into templates, you're counting on half of your brain being supported by an AI, and that structure goes away because there's downtime. You're going to be in a world of trouble. So you've got to start with write your own note. Then we're going to help you write your note a little bit faster. And then here's the AI. Compare your note to the AI. Can you make yours better? And then make the AI note better. And then train the AI, learn coding so that you can train the AI to be a better AI. I mean, there's many levels of med education. And I think I'm stuck in the mud and I'm going to force people to go through it. But there's going to be folks who are younger than me who are like starting with, let's edit AI and take it to the next level. I'm like, I can't think that far ahead. But I think there's risk of losing fundamental knowledge by assuming that the infrastructure will always be there for you.
Yeah. That's something Spencer Dorn, I know, posts a lot about this on LinkedIn, and he really stresses like how much of a clinical thought process goes into like thinking of your note, and like that process of actually generating that. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head. When you use an automated template and then an AI that's writing your note, you do miss that piece. And it's like, it's tough because we have to have those tools because we got to make people faster and more efficient so they can take care of more people. That problem's not going away. But yeah, as far as the learning process, there has to be something. That's why, yeah, I think what you just explained and what Yale's done, initially, I think those are brilliant use cases. So,
I mean, there are some things that we will hopefully get to the point where the reliability is so high that you don't think about the stuff before. I mean, when's the last time I remembered the 10 digits of my parents' phone number? I don't. It's like Dad, right? So hopefully that continues to be reliable, that I don't have to go look up his number in the future. But, at what point do these tools become so ingrained, so bomb-proof that they never fail, that you can say, all right, now I can use my brain for more advanced things rather than remembering the elements of
Awesome. Well, so let's pivot to our final nerd alert round. I know you definitely fit the mold of a certified nerd physician in a good way. That's a compliment, actually. If it didn't come out that way, okay, you're good. Like, that sounds like an insult. Right. Yeah, but no, we always use nerd in the positive context. So these are fun questions, and I think we'd just love to hear how your response to these. So, you ready for this? Okay.
Let's go.
So I guess, when did you first know you were going to become a famous informatics songwriter?
2011, just before our Epic go live. And my wife, driving home from skiing, says, Elton John just sang, she checked my templates last night, pre-flight. And we had just invented pre-flight checklists for our doctors. I'm like, she says, that's a song you have to sing. I'm like, no, I don't sing in public. No. And so at the kitchen table that night was when I wrote Epic Man, and the world for me changed.
Amazing.
That was a pivotal night. How about, we talked a lot about AI, and I know that you use generative AI outside of work too. What's your favorite non-healthcare, non-work related use case of generative AI you've found so far?
I've tried to avoid it. I'm in the middle of sort of writing a manuscript on informatics, and I don't want actually AI telling me how to write it. I expect it'll help me and that'll go faster. I'm a stick in the mud about I'm going to drag my way to the end of this thing and it'll be mine. But yes, actually for my blog, I love not having to worry about stealing photos or pictures from the internet and being able to say, my topic is this. Show me a doctor whose patient just threw a water bottle at their chest. And you'll be surprised how often it's wrong. You're like, no, that's a rocket-powered water bottle no. But that's interesting, right? So that's kind of interesting.
That was funny. My daughter last night, she's going to run for, class representative over 8th grade. And so she was writing her speech that is like at the end of the month. And, I yelled up to her room and I was like, Keegan, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm writing my speech. And I was like, are you using AI? And she goes, no, I'm not. And so what she did, though, which I think was brilliant, is she wrote the speech. It has to be a short speech, but she wrote it. She got all her points on it. Then she put it into Copilot and just said, hey, I'm giving a speech as an 8th grader. I want this to be kind of as succinct as possible. Like she knows how to prompt these things. And honestly, the output, she sent me both of them. She's like, which one do you like better? And I was like, that's amazing, Keegan. I was like, yours is great. I was like, the AI version it sounds like you. It's just even shorter and more to the point. And then so she's massaged it a little more. And, now she has this amazing speech that was, to your point, it was like drafted and assisted. Super cool. All right. So let's flip to like hobbies outside of work. We already alluded to your ukulele habit, but what's your go-to hobbies outside of work for fun?
Oh, I enjoy cycling. Some of you may have read my triple bypass blog that I wrote about a month ago. But yeah, I enjoy being out on the road. Colorado's spectacular. The mountains are phenomenal. Don't love necessarily climbing the mountains, but descending the mountains are phenomenal too. So
yeah, descending always has a nice breeze on your face.
Colorado is a great place, but let's talk about travel. Any favorite travel destinations that you have or upcoming travel, however you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll be heading to Europe, London and Paris in about a month or so. And a couple of years ago, headed to South Korea. Never been to Korea before, and spectacular to see another culture and how a wonderful civilization comes together in a very different way.
Awesome. All right, last question. What's your favorite way to consume information and learnings? And I'll tell you why we ask it that way. We used to ask, like, what's your favorite book? And then we got someone that said, I don't read books. I watch YouTube. And so I was like, oh, we got to rephrase it. So Dale's kind of recrafted it that way. Yeah.
I'm old style. My kids are like, you know what? I'm going to pull up YouTube and learn something. My daughter actually said, I volunteered in 8th grade at the time. I'm going to play ukulele accompaniment to Over the Rainbow. And I said, well, you don't know how to play that. She says, no problem. I'm going to search YouTube. Right. And in fact, she learns from Israel Kamaokawe, the reggae lilt strum, and she did that in the space of 3 weeks. Like that, my brain doesn't work that way, but hers does. Right. I love reading books still. And I still have a book club. Every 3 months, we read a book together, Leading Change, Managing Transitions, The Righteous Mind, a fair number of other things. And that's how I sort of get my thoughts together. And I love referring to them, the big ideas in each one of them, and pull them together in unique ways. So that's my enjoyment. But no, that's not part of the technological acceleration. I'm going to get further and further behind the way I'm doing it. And I know that. But you know what? That's too bad. That's the way it is.
Well, sweet CT, I really, Dale and I obviously appreciate you taking time to chat with us today. We probably could have chatted for another hour or so, but I'm sure you have another meeting here at the top of the hour. But any parting words that you want to wrap with?
You want a song?
Of course. Let's do it.
So If you can spot it, I refer to all three of the AI generative projects that we're either doing or about to do in this song, and it goes to Sweet Caroline. When we began, I couldn't understand you, but now I know you're growing strong. I met you in winter, AI winter melted to spring. Who'd have believed chat would come along? Replies, message replies, notes summarized, surprising you, surprising me. Chat GPT, bum bum bum, you're helping doctors do their best. We can agree, bum bum bum, that your help leaves me refreshed. And now we look at these charts. Now they don't seem so daunting. We summarize them easily. And when I'm tired, tiredness rolls off my shoulders. When you compose, I click agree. Replies, message replies, notes summarized, surprising you, surprising me. Chat GPT, bum bum bum, helping doctors do their best. We can agree, bum bum bum, that your help leaves me refreshed. And now I'm going home.
Thank you, CT, for that closer. Amazing, as always. Great to see you, and we look forward to seeing you in person here soon.
Great.
Cool. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved, a Nerd MD's podcast by Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold.